The Super Bowl halftime show is supposed to be one of the few moments left in American culture where everyone is watching the same thing at the same different teams. Diffre back on stage. One performance, and that's exactly why this year's halftime show didn't just spark reactions. It triggered a full-blown cultural argument. He made a choice, and that choice split the audience in a way some people called it historic. Some people called it distress. Some people said it felt unifying. Others said and if you've been watching how culture works lately, you already know why this moment mattered so much more than this wasn't about whether you like Bad Bunny's music. This was about what the Super Bowl represents. Bad Bunny walked onto the biggest stage in American entertainment and leaned heavily into Spanish language music, Latin culture, and symbolism that didn't ask for pay for millions of viewers. That felt powerful. For millions of others, it felt like the moment no longer belonged to them. And that discomfort is where the real story starts, because controversy doesn't come from nothing. It comes from expectations being challenged. For decades, the Super Bowl halftime show followed an unspoken rule. The performance should be familiar enough that almost everyone feels included. Even when artists pushed boundaries, there was always a sense that the show was designed to meet the audience where they already were. This time, it didn't. Bad Bunny didn't adapt himself to the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl adapted to Bad Bunny. And that reversal is what shook people. Some viewers felt like they were being invited into a culture they don't normally see centered at that scale. Others felt like they were being told, this moment isn't about you, and whether that reaction is fair or not depends entirely on how you see America right now. Because the uncomfortable truth is this: America doesn't agree on what unity looks like anymore. For one group, unity means everyone sharing the same cultural references. For another group, unity means acknowledging that the country already contains many cultures, even if not everyone understands them. And the halftime show became the battlefield for that argument. What made this moment even louder was how intentional it felt. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a let's sprinkle in diversity performance. This was a headline act where Spanish wasn't a feature. It was the foundation. And for fans of Bad Bunny, that was the point. They saw it as overdue representation. They saw it as proof that Latin culture isn't something on the margins of American life anymore. It's central to it. They saw it as reality finally showing up on screen. But critics saw something else. They saw the Super Bowl, an event they associate with American tradition, suddenly speaking in a language they don't understand, culturally and literally. And instead of curiosity, the reaction for many was defensiveness. Because when people feel excluded, they don't usually say, I want to learn more. They say, this isn't for me. That's human nature. And politicians, commentators, and influencers were quick to weaponize that feeling. Within hours, the performance wasn't being discussed as art. It was being discussed as ideology. Was this about inclusion, or was it about signaling? Was this a celebration of diversity, or was it a deliberate provocation? And once those questions enter the conversation, there's no neutral ground left. One of the most revealing parts of this entire situation wasn't even the performance itself. It was the reaction afterward. Because while millions praised the show, another group felt so disconnected that they didn't just complain, they created an alternative. An entirely separate all-American style halftime event popped up at the same time, marketed toward viewers who felt the main show no longer reflected their values or identity. Think about that for a second. We've reached a point where a single halftime show couldn't hold the audience together. That's not about Bad Bunny. That's about where culture is right now. When people start building parallel experiences instead of sharing one, it means the center has cracked. And once the center cracks, everything becomes symbolic. Bad Bunny holding a football that Read Together We Are America was meant to be a unifying message. But even that message was interpreted differently depending on who was watching. Some saw it as genuine, others saw it as ironic, some saw it as hopeful, others saw it as forced. And that's the problem with symbolism in a polarized environment. It never lands the same way twice. There's also an uncomfortable conversation nobody wants to fully have: language. Spanish is the most spoken, non-English language in the United States. Millions of Americans speak it at home. Millions more understand it casually. Yet, for some viewers, hearing Spanish dominate the Super Bowl stage felt jarring. Not because it was foreign, but because it challenged an assumption about what is default. And that reaction says more about cultural comfort than about the performance itself. Because representation always feels political to people who are used to being represented. If you've always seen yourself reflected on screen, the moment someone else takes center stage can feel like displacement instead of expansion. That's not a moral judgment. It's a psychological one. And this halftime show exposed that tension in real time. Bad Bunny didn't explain himself. He didn't apologize. He didn't pivot. He performed as if the stage already belonged to him. And for his fans, that confidence was empowering. For critics, it felt confrontational. But here's where the conversation gets deeper. The Super Bowl halftime show hasn't been neutral in a very long time. From political imagery to social messaging to deliberate casting choices, it has slowly become a mirror of where culture is headed, not where it's been. This was just the first time the shift felt undeniable. The truth is, the audience has changed. The demographics have changed. The culture has changed. What hasn't changed is the expectation that everyone should feel equally comfortable all the time. And that expectation may no longer be realistic. That doesn't mean division is good. But it does mean that moments like this are inevitable. What fascinates me most is how fast the conversation stopped being about music. Nobody is arguing about vocals. Nobody is arguing about choreography. Nobody is arguing about stage design. They're arguing about identity. About belonging, about ownership of cultural space. And that's why this halftime show will be remembered far longer than most. Not because it was flawless, but because it forced people to confront a question they'd rather avoid. Who is the Super Bowl for now? Is it for the audience that built it? Or the audience that currently lives in the country? Or both? And if it's both, what does that actually look like in practice? Bad Bunny didn't answer those questions. He just stood in the middle of them. And whether you loved or hated the performance, it worked in one undeniable way. It made people talk. It made people uncomfortable. It made people reveal how they see America. And maybe that's why reactions were so intense. Because entertainment used to distract us from these conversations. Now it triggers them. So here's the uncomfortable possibility nobody wants to say out loud. Maybe the Super Bowl halftime show didn't encourage division. Maybe it exposed division that was already there. Maybe the split reactions aren't a failure of the performance, but a reflection of a country that no longer agrees on a shared cultural language. And that's not something a singer can fix, or avoid, or smooth over with a catchy chorus. That's something the audience has to sit with. Because moments like this don't ask, "Did you enjoy the show?" They ask, "Do you feel seen?" And when half the audience says yes and the other half says no, that tells you exactly where things stand. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think this halftime show was a bold, necessary reflection of what America already is? Or do you think the Super Bowl should still aim to be a neutral space where everyone feels equally included, even if that means playing it safe? And be honest with yourself when you answer. Because this wasn't just about Bad Bunny. It was about who we expect the biggest. Stage in the country to speak to, and in what language.